We started online in October of 2013. And by October 27th, 4 days later, I told her I loved her.
Wow. I'm Emily Calloway, and this is Kismet. Kismet is a podcast featuring real love stories of fate and serendipity from people who've met the one. Today, I'll be speaking with Tony Randall, who is sharing his Kismet story about how he met his wife from all the way across the country. Hey, Tony.
Hello, hello.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it and being one of my first guests here. So again, thank you for your patience. I'm sure there's going to be some technical difficulties along the way, but I really appreciate it.
Anytime we work with technology, there's always going to be something that kind of makes you go, So that's totally fine. Learning curve and all that good stuff.
To start out with, I would love for you to just share a little bit about yourself, apart from your partnership. Just tell us who you are and your little bit about your background, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I am from Ohio originally, and my family moved us to the South when I was about 9 years old, which was, I wouldn't have voted for that, but I didn't get a vote. I was only 9. And then I moved to California. I moved to San Diego in my early 20s, and that was right after I had gotten married and we had our first child, and lived in San Diego for almost 20 years, and I still really feel like that's home for me. I miss it. Then through business, I was in radio. I was in radio for 36 years. My business partner and I moved to Nashville, where we syndicated our show across the country. As far as me, I was a theater and communications major in college. I didn't graduate because once I got my first radio job, I didn't see the need to continue to get a degree for something I was already doing in the real world. And it was a hobby that turned into a career, a very good one. And then in the 90s, when we lived in San Diego, my business partner and I became buddies with a guy named Stu Siegel. And if you're of a certain age, I guarantee you've seen some of his TV shows, because he was like the king of producing bad television in the 90s. Renegade, 18 Wheels of Justice, Silk Stockings, Pensacola Wings of Gold. Those were all produced out of San Diego, and I'm on most of them because we live there.
Amazing.
And he gave us the chance to get in there, so it was fun. I had given up my acting dreams at that point, because once you have kids, it's hard to think about going to New York or LA and doing that. Not for everybody, but in my mind, it was like it wasn't my priority at that time. So it was fun to get to do some of those things, get our SAG card and feel like we were important for a minute. But then, life goes on, and I had, through a marriage and 3 kids, ended up not being married anymore. And I guess that kind of brings us up to where we'll talk about the rest of that story.
So let's get into the good stuff here. So I'd love to hear, before your love story, where were you in life, essentially? Where were you dating? You mentioned that you got in a divorce. So were you dating actively? Were you happily single? Were you unhappily single? What was sort of your lifestyle and your mind space at that time?
Yeah, it was interesting. I got married young. When she got pregnant, which was a surprise to us, we were like, okay, well, we'll do this. And then we had, 2 more kids, and then we stayed married. It was, for me, fairly early in that marriage, I realized, this was a mistake. I should not have gotten married just because, she got pregnant. We could have been, I think, much happier not doing that. So, and plus having some Irish background and that Catholic background, you don't want to get a divorce. So you do your best to sludge through that thing. 20 some odd years of marriage, when halfway through that you realize this is not where I want to be, I was very unhappy. And she wasn't happy either, in fairness. So once we got the divorce, when my son graduated from high school, I finally had the courage to say, I'm moving forward with this. At that point, I'm in my late 30s, early 40s, and I can't do this. I've got to get out. So I was at first very happily single. This was a split that I wanted. It was a split that was a long time coming, and I was very pleased to just have some time for me. My kids were not, they weren't all grown per se. My oldest was still in college at that point, I think, yeah. And then my son had graduated high school. My youngest was still in school, and she lived with me for a while, then lived with her mom for a while. We waited long enough that they had a say in that. So it wasn't like somebody's fighting to have the kids all the time. That was one thing where we kind of agreed that they needed both of us. So that worked out well. I was just not in the mood, not looking for in any post-marriage thing. I didn't want another marriage. I didn't want another relationship even. And I'm not a big dater. I never really was, even in high school and In college, I was kind of, what do they call Hugh Grant in Four Weddings and a Funeral? A serial monogamist. You know, I liked being in a relationship. I didn't do the one night stand thing. I just wasn't that way. And so I was living a lot of my life. You know, I had a job still in radio doing all that, but I was also online a lot. And at that time, Twitter was really fun. And so that's kind of where I was going to, as an outlet for comedy. I was writing a lot of jokes and having a lot of fun there. And so my mindset was pretty happy most of the time. Occasional loneliness, because when you've been with somebody, and not even that person, I didn't miss her as a person. I just missed, I think, the people around me. I didn't even have a dog. My whole life I had pets. And the first place I moved into after the divorce didn't allow pets. So I couldn't even bring one of my dogs with me. So it was a drastic change. So not unhappy, but a little lonely. And so that's kind of where my mindset was.
Awesome. And so that leads us to the next phase in the story here. So Twitter, that was a big part of your story, or I guess the biggest part of your story. So take me into this whole Twitter love match situation.
Well, you know, it's funny. I know we talked before about dating apps and things like that. Never even crossed my mind to enter into that world. I had no interest. So I certainly wasn't going on Twitter to find somebody to date or hook up with or anything else. And certainly you just being on there, you run across your share of people who are sliding into your DMs like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I'm just like, "Nothing's going on. Please leave me alone." But over time, being on there a lot and spending, I spent a lot of time. In the evenings, I'd turn on television, and then I would just scroll Twitter, which I think is what a lot of people were doing in that time, mid 2000s. And through my travels, I found a lot of people that I liked to follow because they were funny. That's why I was there. I was there for funny, for comedy, for laughter. I made several over the years, really true, real life friends that I met through Twitter all around the world. And then this face popped up in my feed, and the first thing I did, of course, you see who it is, and like, oh, okay, she's pretty, and then I found she's also hilarious, really great sense of humor, and a sense of humor that's not like just, oh, haha, I'm funny, but like really my kind of sense of humor, really sarcastic, really acerbic, really digging in on things, and I was like, wow, this is great, so we follow her, and then she followed me back. We never really spoke, we never really interacted. But I was always retweeting her, always, starring her stuff. And then, over a period of time, and I'm not even sure how long it was because I'm not a fast mover, I finally said, okay, clearly I like this woman. She's really funny. I'm just going to, this is, I'm sure, late at night after a few bourbons. So I'm going to shoot her a DM and just say hi. And it was so difficult because there are so many creeps online, and I didn't want to be one of them, And I just, I felt like just even saying something late at night on a DM opens that door and makes a red flag go up. So I was really trying to be careful, complimenting, but not being, and I think it still came off kind of creepy. I don't know, but I basically said, hey, I just wanted to say hi. I think you're hilarious. And she does it still to this day. Your hair is gorgeous, and you can see it in her avatar. So it's really something. Not trying to be a creep. Okay, thanks, bye. And that was it. And so a little time went by, not a lot. You can pop these up. I actually have screenshots. I saved most of the screenshots from all of our DM conversations when we started out. So I'll definitely share some of those.
So
but
cute.
She had sent back after a period of time, hey, wow, you just messaged somebody one time and then I don't hear from you again. That's rude. And that was the door. That she opened the door. And I immediately sent back, oh, hey, I didn't want to be weird. Thank you. So if I have your permission, of course I'll. And it just started this conversation. And it started out, remaining in DMs for a while. I don't remember how long. And right away, I liked her. I liked her attitude. I liked her playfulness. She was flirty, but not weird. I was trying to be flirty, but not weird. You're feeling each other out at that point. It's still kind of like, and then in the back of your mind, you're like, is this even who this person is? And I'm sure she's, thinking the same thing. I see an avatar. Is that who this is? I don't know. So we eventually moved it to text. We shared phone numbers and we texted for a while. And I would leave work and immediately text her and we would start talking. And she's at work too. And then we finally had a conversation on the phone, got to hear each other's voices, and I fell in love with her voice. Just loved hearing her talk and tell stories. And then, we had that, we got to see each other. We got to see if we're actually, so we did the Skype thing. And it really snowballed faster than I could have imagined.
So over how much time, like how long did it take for this sort of organic blossoming of a relationship to happen over phone calls and Skype, etc.?
Well, I'm going to do a quick check because I was trying to be a better person with this relationship than I was with my first wife. And so I really started taking, and I know this maybe is a really nerdy thing to do, but I started taking avid notes just about big things in our relationship so that I would never forget them. And I always wanted to make sure that, I had these things in my head. So I can tell you, we started online in October of 2013. And by October 27th, 4 days later, I told her I loved her.
Wow.
And I know that sounds nuts. And I had friends who were like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm again, going back to the nerdy factor. I'm online going, is it possible to fall in love with somebody after just a couple of days? But I mean, we were spending 10, 12 hours a day on the phone, on Skype. I mean, we couldn't get enough of each other. It was just this weird feeling. I had never felt like that about anyone in my life. And it was just so weird and such an overwhelming sense of what is going on. And she told me she loved me too. And she came to visit me not long after that. I think she came before Christmas to visit. So we got to be with each other, not for long, just for a weekend. She had to get back. But we knew, I mean, this is a thing. This is real. Wow. And I'm sure there are people who are like, okay, he's going through some kind of midlife thing. It'll run its course in a few months or whatever. And it didn't. She, in the spring of 2014, she and I decided that she should come live with me. And so she went to her work. She worked for a major corporation at that time, said, look, I'd love to keep my job. Could I work remotely? And they were like 100%. And she packed up her stuff, and she and her brother drove across country with her dog. And suddenly I had this person in my life, and I had a dog in my life again. So it was a double win for me.
That's amazing. So had she been married, or was this like a big leap of faith and everything for her as well? Just,
Yeah. Well, she had been married. She'd actually been married a couple of times. Once really young, and it just wasn't the right thing. Second time, she stayed married longer, but that marriage was similar to my marriage, where it was like, pretty soon this is not right. Mm-hmm. But you're trying to get through it. You're trying to see if there's a way to make it work. So she and I had both just come out of really tough relationships. She wasn't looking for anybody either. I mean, we had so much in common that way, where we weren't actively seeking out anything. In fact, she talks about it in those DMs. She actively was really pushing people away. Like, I don't want this. I don't want your attention. I don't want to be, this is not what I'm here for. So it was shocking to both of us. And, she moved in, and we just got along. It just clicked. We just fit. Everything was great. We laughed every day, and it's not perfect. Obviously, you have disagreements, but it was so much different than what I was used to, which was just always fighting, always not getting along, not being able to remember the good things because there were so many bad things. It was the opposite of that, where everything was great, and I didn't mind the little weird things. She has her idiosyncrasies. I have a million. And, we forgave that immediately to just be us. And it's been great. Now, she wanted to get married again. She wanted that. I told her, I wasn't sure about marriage. I said, again, going back to the Hugh Grant thing, could you, possibly stay with me for the rest of your life and not be married? But she really wanted it. Although I was very slow. It was, we lived together for several years before I finally, broke down and popped the question, and she said yes. So, well, we've been together now, it'll be a little over 11 years. We've only been married, I think it'll be 3 this year. So
that's amazing. I love that story. So did she ever tell you what it was about your DM? Was it your humor? Was it your picture? Was it your approach? Like, what was it that made her say yes to your DM versus the other ones that she was getting?
I don't know if she ever specified that. I mean, she called me charming at one point, and that was very sweet. I think part of it is, I was a grown-up. I had been through a lot of life. I had already raised kids. I wasn't a creep. I think she could see that, feel that. I wasn't trying to just, get with somebody online in a weird way. I genuinely liked her and genuinely wanted to get to know her, and I think she felt that too. And like I said, I mentioned that how fast it went. We both just felt it. We both just knew, and it was such a huge thing for me because that late in life, having already been raised kids, been married, but still not ever knowing what that feeling was. You know, you see it in movies, and it's so fun to watch. And I'm a softie. I love those kind of movies. But I was like, man, I don't understand it. I've never had that. I've never felt that. And then once we had it, I was like, okay, now I get it now. I see why, why these movies do so well. I see why people love this. They all want something like that in their life. And so few people, I think, are lucky enough to find it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine what, especially her friends and family, but also what yours thought initially with this like kind of whirlwind romance and moving in together across the country after a short period of time. What was that like?
My folks were already passed away, so they didn't really have a say in that. My friends, they were concerned. I keep a tight circle of friends. I don't have like a giant group of people, but the friends I have are close. And I think they later came back and said, we didn't get it until we met her. Mm-hmm. And then once we met her and saw you guys together, and especially, my business partner is also my best friend, and he and I have known each other since we were really young. And he was like, man, I love her. I said, she is so fun. She's so great to be around. And anybody, and I'm not trying to, this is not a bag session on my ex-wife because, that's not what I'm about. But I will say that anytime I brought her around people who knew my ex-wife, they were immediately like, oh, okay. Well, we get this. This is what it, yeah, okay. She's great. It's so much easier. It's so much different. They all understood the moment that they saw us together and saw how we were together. Now, our love language is interesting because our love language is roasting each other constantly. So some people don't get that, especially women, like my partner's wife, they were dating when he, at that point, and she was like, he told me that she came to him and said, I can't believe they talk to each other like that. and I get that. It's not for everybody, but for us, it's just who we were. We already knew we had that sense of humor. Yeah. So for us, it was a natural thing to crack on each other that way. And I think it's been very healthy for us. And it's fun.
I mean, you did meet on Twitter. So you met through your comedy, your mutual, and the fact that you're both able to communicate in a comedic way that attracts each other on Twitter, that's something I could not write, I don't know, however many 250 characters or whatever to anyone through that. I'm pretty sure. So
yeah,
I think that's pretty magical too.
It was great. It was a lot, and it was different then too. Twitter was different. It was still Twitter. It was still a lot more fun. It was a lot less of what it has become. And you're right. This was before they increased the characters, so you're writing really sharp, funny things in a really short amount of time or a really short amount of characters. And it was a skill set that that we shared. And it really for me, it all goes back to that because I could never be with somebody who didn't make me laugh, and she makes me laugh every day. So,
yeah. So, how much time was it between your divorce and meeting her on Twitter?
Not a lot. I didn't get. I feel like I meant to have this time to myself, and I got some. I had got several months. I guess the divorce process began. Well, I said after my son. So it began in May of that year. And so then we go to October, so however many months that is in between. I don't remember when the divorce was final, but it was much shorter than I expected. I really thought that I would go the rest of my life just being me. It was shocking. And I should back up real quick because you asked about family and friends, and I didn't mention her family and friends. They, I don't know everything that they thought or said. I mean, they're very protective. They have a very tight knit family. Her grandfather was a first generation American from Lebanon, and then her mother's side Irish. So they had very strong opinions. They're very fiery. Mm-hmm. And I can say the first time that I flew out to meet them, she asked me if I was nervous. I said, no. I said, I'm not. I'm actually really good with parents and family. I also am an adult. I'm not meeting your parents as a teenager or a 20-year-old. And like her, we all just got along. I just fell right into this family, and it was such a pleasure for me because I didn't have a lot of family at that point anymore. And now I have these aunts and uncles and a father-in-law and a mother-in-law who are wonderful. And to be fair, I should say I won the lottery with in-laws because even my ex-wife's in-laws, we still communicate, and they're lovely people. So I was very lucky in that sense. Her family, a little bigger, a little more. Again, that Lebanese really comes through. They're fiery but they're so fun. And we just have a blast, and we make they're like her. We make fun of each other. They'll slam on me, and I give it right back to them, and we just have the most wonderful time when we get together. So I'm sure they had their doubts at first, but I hope that in their hearts and minds, as soon as they met me on that first trip out to California, because she's from the Bay Area, and we tried to get around and see everybody we could, that they were like, okay, Katie picked a good one.
So how did she adjust to moving from the Bay Area, being a California girl to the South? I know Nashville's, it's hip. It's but it's still the South. So how is that adjustment for her?
It has its challenges. Like you say, the good news is if you're in the city, and we are, you almost don't realize you're in the South unless you go down to Lower Broadway where all the tourists are, because there are similar communities. Like she'll see parts of town and she'll be like, oh, this actually reminds me a lot of Benicia or Vallejo or that those East Bay areas where she grew up and spent time. So I don't think it was as hard as it could have been if we had been somewhere else. Now we would love to get back to California. I hope that we can make that happen. I'd love to have her closer to her family. Her family's really important to her, and they're getting older, and I hate that they're so far away. So
yeah. So you mentioned when we started out, you said that you took notes, and that was something that you did that was different. So what are anything else that you did that sort of was different about this relationship that your past relationships sort of taught you? And led you to like doing things a little bit differently, investing in a different way?
Yeah. I think the big one, and I've certainly been guilty of this, is trying not to be as selfish. I spent a lot of time on myself, even in that first marriage, and I don't feel like I gave as much as I should have. I don't think it would have saved it even if I had, but I've tried to be better about that. I have my own emotional and mental things going on just like everybody else. So I know there are times when I'm not as cognizant of that as I should be. But I said going in, I really want to be better about being more present for you, making sure that I'm giving you everything you need and being more attentive and not being so wrapped up in my own whatever's going on up here. I think that's the biggest one probably. Yeah,
I think that's also being an adult too. Like, your past marriage sounds like relationships we all had, like trying to square peg, round hole, that kind of situation where, it works, but it works until it doesn't work, I guess you'd say. Not like it sounds like you have now, which is just the right fit. But I love that you've taken those lessons that you also learned through that prior relationship and all the prior relationships and taken those to be a better partner to your lovely wife now.
Well, I'm far from perfect, and I still have a lot of work to do, but she's very patient, and what I like about her too is that she is all about calling things out as they happen, not having something I do that upsets her and then letting it fester for months and then coming back and it becomes this huge thing because it's grown into this awful, I've been thinking about this for months now and you did that thing. And when you finally say something, it's way worse than it could have been. So she's really good about, hey, you did this thing over the weekend and it really made me upset or whatever the case may be. And allows me to, apologize sooner and try to make that right sooner so that it doesn't become bigger than it should. And I think that's something that a lot of relationships that happens. Maybe guys are more guilty. I don't know. Sometimes it's just easier to go along. You're like, I won't bring this up. It's no big deal. But then the more you think about it, the bigger it becomes in your mind. Mm-hmm. And so then at a time that is completely inappropriate, that makes no sense, it comes out in some way. Maybe you're in an argument about something else and, this happened 6 months ago and blah, 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 blah. And now you've got this whole other thing going on. And I really don't want to be guilty of that. And it happened all the time in my last relationship and hers too. She had she had those same kind of problems. So I think we both tried to bring in something new, tried to bring in lessons, be better people. We're still working on that, but it works a lot better when you start out on good ground.
Absolutely. I mean, no one likes to have those conversations. It's difficult to have difficult conversations, especially with somebody you care about. You don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. You don't want to, rock the boat sometimes. But to your point, I think that it's always so important because otherwise it will build and compound. And then to your point, blows up. So I love that. Do you have any advice that you would give singles that are out there who are still looking for their one?
Gosh, I guess just be open to opportunities. I never, I guess I wasn't looking, didn't think I would be looking, but then when this thing fell in my lap, and especially when you look at the fact, the internet changed everything so much, even beyond dating apps and stuff. I'm talking about just like social media. I'm on an app that millions of people are on around the world, and the timeline is just a constant scroll of stuff that I don't care. And somehow through that, a person that I never would have met if it wasn't, for that internet, for that app, is in my life and is now, is my life. So I'd say don't expect those things to happen, but be open to them happening. It could be somebody right across the street that you've just never, I wonder who lives in that house, and you see it every day, or maybe you see him from a distance. If it's somebody in your life that you see every day, what's the line? Not to be gross, Silence of the Lambs. We covet what we see every day. So if you see somebody that you really are interested in every day, don't keep waiting around. Make a move. The worst thing that can happen is they say no. And you say, okay, well, shoot, I wish that had gone somewhere. It wasn't supposed to be. And so you keep doing that. If you're on these, whatever app you're on, whatever social media you're on, and you come across something, be open to it. You just never know. Be cautious, but don't be unoptimistic.
Yeah, I love that. And the romanticism also, I think there is a point to that as well, whereas you saw this opportunity, you saw someone that you liked and connected with, and they lived across the country. And there is complications that are inherent with that, like we have different lives. We have families that are far apart that we care about and want to be close to. We have careers. We have, all of these different types of adjustments. So, the fact that you were open to engaging and like seeing where it went and like allowing for that possibility to present itself, I think that is something to really, learn from as well. I think a lot of people just see what is practical and what's realistic for them in the moment, and they're not open to those opportunities, which you just never know. Like, you don't know where your person can be, and it could be somebody in San Francisco on Twitter. You never know. Yeah. Or X now.
Yeah. It's still Twitter to me. You put that in, you put the work in, when that started happening for us, and I see people talk about, well, long distance, it'll never work. It can work if you want it to work. Once we had seen each other on Skype, then we would have date nights on Fridays and Saturdays. We'd pick a movie we wanted to watch. And so we'd, okay, we're going to watch it on Netflix. So we'd get it ready. And then, she'd order her food, I'd order my food, and we would just turn on our cameras on our phones with each other, and we'd watch a movie, together. And we got to laugh together at movies that were funny. We got to be scared of movies that were scary. We got to have it was a great date, And the one thing, it doesn't end with a kiss goodnight. It doesn't end with anything physical. You can't have that. That's the one drawback. But it definitely lets you build something, in my opinion, meaningful, because you're building a relationship based on emotion and human experience and things that you share, and all these things, build. And for us, when that opportunity to manifest that physically finally came, it just made it all the more wonderful, because we already had all these things that we knew and we had in common. We'd already built this relationship. We'd been telling each other the stories of our lives. We knew everything about each other, and it was just incredible. So yeah, I think, being open to those things. If it comes up and it's a long distance thing, don't just give up right away because it's long distance. Even if someone or maybe you yourself had a bad experience that way, it doesn't have to be a bad experience. It could be something great, but you won't know until you try.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had the COVID lockdown dates before COVID was actually even a thing. So groundbreaking in that sense. But no, I do think like what you were just saying, I mean, I think that I personally have mentioned that to friends over the years is I wish there was more time to get to know people these days. I feel like there's such a rush to just, power through, especially with the app dates. It's like you cycle through and not really taking that time to see if there's something real there. There's always feels like there's a pressure to be somewhere, maybe physically or wherever. Whereas, a lot of really strong relationships are built with friendship first and really taking that time to know each other's wants and desires and hopes and traumas and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Being a Gen Xer, this is a weird analogy, but I'm a huge TV and film nut, and she is too. I look back to shows that first started, well, shoot, you don't have to be a Gen Xer. Look at Seinfeld. There's a show that didn't start out very strong. I mean, it's obviously legendary now, but its first few seasons were not great in the ratings, but NBC believed in that show. They felt they had something, so they gave it the time it needed to develop and become what it became. Relationships need that too. If you're just on to the next thing right away because that wasn't as fun as I thought it would be, or that rubbed me the wrong way, it's just, you got to give things time. And we gave it, as rushed as our relationship seemed, we gave it time though. We spent the time. We put in time early to make sure that it was as real as we thought it was. Because when it starts out, you can't believe it's real. It doesn't seem like it could be real. But then you put in that time. You have those long distance dates. You take the time to spend. Even my kids were like, "You talk to somebody on the phone for 6 hours? Who are you?" They just couldn't believe it. But we put in that time to know everything we could know before it moved forward. And every time it moved forward a little bit, it was always this great step in the right direction. So,
yeah. Are there any positive surprises other than just having this like really fulfilling relationship? Any positive surprises that just kind of caught you off guard with this relationship?
I don't know. I mean, I guess not. It's that sounds odd to say, but it was so good from the beginning. It went so well starting out. Everything built so well. I mean, it was hard to be surprised with. I mean, everything good that happened, it was just like, yeah, okay, of course this is good. It's just good. The more surprising things are when things, when we have bad times, it's like, man, this isn't like us. We shouldn't be this way. This is not who we are. So those are the things that you want to fix quicker, and those are the things that are like, I've been down this road. I don't want to be down this road anymore.
Yeah.
And while no relationship can be perfect 100% of the time, you want to get those numbers up and those averages up as best you can. But yes, positive surprises. Off the top of my head, I can't think of something that surprised me in a positive way, only because everything was so good. It just was, the status quo was for things to be great.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I know you have a podcast. I actually listened to it prior to this. So I'd love to share with our listeners about your podcast and what you're doing.
Sure. I'll try to be quick. Again, I was in radio for a long time. Music is probably my number one love. I was a musician in college. I don't play much anymore, but I just am an encyclopedia. The stuff that I should be remembering, that's why I keep notes about Katie, because the stuff I should be remembering gets pushed out by, who played second guitar on that track, on that fourth album by that, just dumb stuff. So I do music stuff on my own Instagram account, and with my business partner and I, we kept all of our social media stuff, even though we don't really have a show together anymore. But they're all doing very well with the music content that I put up. And in that process, it's funny, I've met my new podcast partner the same way I met my wife, on an app that's not meant for meeting people. We were on Instagram. I slid into his DMs because he's also a music guy and said, "Hey, you and I should do a podcast. What do you think? I have an idea for a podcast." And so it's called Music is the Glue. And he's a Gen Xer who lives in Chicago. I'm a Gen Xer who lives in Nashville, both from Ohio, coincidentally. I'm a white guy, he's a black guy, and we really wanted to do something that celebrated the power of music and how, with the world being so torn apart, with our own country just divided at every turn, that we believe music is the glue that can hold us together. If we can agree on a song that you like or an album that you like, you can start a conversation. If you're somebody who, I don't understand his culture, well, let's listen to some music from that and let's have a conversation. And so we kind of just dive into music that we love. Some of it's surprising you wouldn't expect me to own. Some of it's surprising you wouldn't expect him to own. But he's just a great guy, and we just love talking about music. We're both vinyl collectors, but we're not those. It's not a podcast where if you look in the etching here, we're not weirdo nerds about it. We just like music, and we love talking about it. So yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Music as a Glue podcast. So I will link all of that in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed our conversation. Any last thoughts or notes that you want to share that we didn't get to?
No, I think, I would put a bow on it by just saying what I've already said. If you're out there in it, I feel for you. The trenches are no fun place to be. And when you want love and have a hard time finding it, it's easy to get down on yourself. It's easy to get down on the whole prospect. I'm a romantic. Like I said, I'm a serial monogamist. I love being in relationships. That's how I've kind of lived my life. So don't give up. Stay at it. Don't go looking so hard. Let some things come to you. You never know what might fall in your lap by just, again, being open and being your true self out there. There's somebody out there for everybody. I absolutely believe that. And now with the world being so much bigger in our own hand by holding a mobile device, you never know where you might find that person.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you again, Tony. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
If you have your own Kismet story that you'd like to share, please send it to me at kismetstoriespodcast@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram at kismetstoriespodcast. Until next time, be bold, be kind, and be open to everyday magic, because the love of your life might be just around the corner, or they might be across the country hanging out on Twitter.